entrepreneurial
research.
childhood.
Yeah.
And I'm going to pursue this sport. And basically travels the state. And then Denise Davis is former parliamentarian for Craddock.
It's in a sense also about efficiency and corporate governance, but
General counsel for Ratliff, parliamentarian for Craddock, chief of staff for Strauss.
Efficiency in corporate governance in VC-backed companies versus companies where VCs are not involved.
yeah, well, no, the special cases. Yeah, no, so most of my research has been more about public companies, and they
And then she started
have a
this
different type of concerns.
Yeah.
But what I did about VC was really specific because of the special structure of this
That's great.
which is different.
Mm-hmm.
And it tries to different problems.
Right.
And different concerns. That's why
Dennis can come in.
that's why I sort of look at it as a
Email
Okay,
and I'll
sorry.
Yeah, I'll try it.
Right. That's an interesting
Yeah,
field of
that's
study.
a great idea.
I assume your research is publicly on the interwebs somewhere. I can look it up.
please do, and I
Yeah.
should sell that.
Yeah.
Like, I was
Yeah,
here,
sell
and
access to your
came
research,
back
yeah.
2 years later.
Yeah, everything is on the now.
Yeah, yeah.
And also even things that are public. But the good thing is, there are many companies
Yeah.
that are trying to make profit out of publications, usually in sciences, less
Yes.
basic sciences. Like we don't have this.
Well, to be fair, I love sports pages here.
You should
But
publish
there's more
But
like,
you waste a lot less
Laura
time.
yeah.
Greenberg
speeches here,
Yeah.
right?
wants money
Yeah,
to
that's true.
put everything
We don't
on
write.
SSRM,
Yeah.
social
Yeah.
sciences research,
Let me know if you need anything.
and then you escape all those problems.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
can we,
a
like flag you at any time? You
it's
got
a
it?
racket. The scientific publishing kind of structure. Like Elsevier, like makes billions of dollars a year. Billions. I was staggered the first time I saw what their revenues were.
And they don't pay the authors,
Yeah.
but then they charge the universities where those authors work
Yeah.
so much money.
Yeah. Incredible.
Sevier's just maybe
I was interning
Did they
this summer
really?
in the city of Austin
I'm
for
not sure, but I
Mayor
think
Pro Tem
they
COVID.
do
So,
maybe
yeah.
necessary, which a little bit scared me because it's open exit.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah, they purchased somebody recently. I think I know who you're talking about. Somebody that was considered,
Plenty of time.
one of the smaller players that a more modern alternative to Elsevier, maybe.
something that sort of, oh no, it's we're going into minefield, now I'm going to feel
Hey to meet y'all. On this guy.
Hey Tom, Matt Lessig, nice to meet you.
Lessig, got it.
Yep, the A is silent.
Mira Gaynor.
Gaynor. Okay, I'm just gonna have y'all introduce yourselves if y'all are cool with that.
Sure.
It seems like y'all are probably down, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
It's always tough when you're asked to introduce yourself, like what level of detail you provide, right? I can give like the 8-second version. I can give the.
I know. Like, let me just have a look at it, see if I can figure shit right now.
Maybe you work on
I feel like everyone does work.
Yeah.
especially everything else is
Thinking
not
that the one
Right.
that we have
I
along.
like long walks on the beach and
on the other hand, what
margaritas.
you're doing is much more relevant.
I know, I'm like,
So that's a different story.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah. Have you been on a tour or the inside and
haven't
seen
been
the?
on a tour. I've been across the hall more often.
Yeah.
But not, I guess I was in this space but looked different.
Yeah.
So they provide tours.
Yeah, you can get tours pretty easily. So you go past actually the whole area back there where they have kind of workspaces for companies that are incubating and kind of meeting spaces for members to come and utilize for meetings and connect with mentors, the people that are experts in kind of their field of interest. It's a pretty robust entrepreneurial ecosystem, including like 1,000 plus of these events a year.
Sort of like 3 a day.
Yeah. Sometimes more.
Keep it pretty busy around here.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
All right, so we're gonna get started, guys.
Do you want to talk to begin with, or do you want me to? Okay.
Anybody know?
Should be it, but it's not working.
Yeah, I'm just gonna talk, 'cause I can't figure out this microphone. So, welcome, thank you all for coming. I'm Gina Inahosa, I'm a representative here in Austin. I represent this part of Austin, actually. And I've invited you all to be here to hear this very smart panel about a new law that takes effect September 1 of this year. And it's a law creating a new type of corporation. I'm gonna just act like you all don't know what this is about, though some of you probably know more about it than I do. But a new type of corporation called a benefit corporation. And so a benefit corporation is a corporation, a for-profit corporation that can obviously pursue profits, but that can also pursue a social good or a public good. And so this is the law in over 30 other states in the country. And for whatever reason, we hadn't yet gotten to it here in Texas. In this last legislative session, my freshman session here at the Capitol, we were able to get it done. And I say we were able to get it done because it took like a village of us, of very smart people, to get it done. So with that, I just want to turn it over actually to Tom Visco to introduce
Yep.
the panel, and we can get started.
Okay, so hey all, I'm Tom Visco. I am the co-founder and policy director at Glasshouse Policy, a local 501c3 policy nonprofit here in Austin, and I am tonight's traffic cop to keep things moving. And welcome to Capital Factory, which is Austin's, and this is no offense to y'all, Austin's best known benefit corporation in Austin, which is Capital Factory, which recently applied to become a benefit corporation, I believe in Delaware, but they should do it in Texas now that they
Well,
can.
Maybe that's coming.
And thank you, Representative, for that. So let's just introduce our panel. We'll start with you, Matt.
Great. Hello, everybody. I'm Matt Lessig. I'm co-founder and COO of Data.World, a proud public benefit corporation. We elected to be a public benefit corporation shortly after launch, and I'll tell you more about that story later, but that's my credentials and why I'm here today.
Professor?
Hi, I'm Mira Gaynor. I'm a law professor at UT Law School, and I specialize in corporate governance and also in venture capital.
And I already introduced
And you
myself.
already introduced yourself. So, Matt, I think let's start with you. B Corps is a relatively new concept. I don't think it has a ton of market penetration right now, both sort of public-facing people who understand what they are and what they do, but also as well in places like Capital Factory, right? There's a lot of people, entrepreneurs, who are working on solving big problems, and many of them don't know what a B Corp is, why it matters, and why they want to consider it. So I guess just to start off, talk a little bit about what B Corps are, but then also what attracted Data.World to become a B Corp. What was the calculus there?
Yeah, so we founded almost 2 years ago, and we very much had a social mission at our heart, as well as an aspiration to be a transformative technology platform, how people collaborate around data and share data. But we also saw the potential, if we're successful, to really connect more of the people who work in data, bring more of the data into the public domain, facilitate collaboration and research. And we thought if we were really successful in this vision, that there was going to have a pretty enormous public good and going to accelerate research of all types. So that was one of the reasons why we actually, as a co-founding team, decided on the concept that we did. So from the outset, even in the selection criteria of what business we were going to form, and to step back a step, there is 4 co-founders at Data.World. Most of us have worked together before. It's a group of pretty seasoned entrepreneurs and technology executives, and we got together with the express intent of starting a business together because we love working together, but we actually didn't have an idea. And we really identified early on there are 2 things that we wanted to achieve. One was have a really transformative, pioneering technology company, not a derivative Me Too idea, and that we really wanted to do something that would have a material impact on society if we were successful. So we had that very much in our DNA, and we went out and raised funds with traditional venture capitalists, both here in Austin and Silicon Valley and Chicago, New York. And we very much promoted the vision around open data collaboration and what it could mean for society, but we were talking about technology platform as well. And through this process, we really got in touch with how, in the long term, we were going to protect that mission. Because it's easy to say that when you're starting off and you're kind of gung-ho, and there's a lot of companies that put a mission on the wall that they care about. But later on, when times get tough and kind of push comes to shove in the boardroom, the only thing you're really technically allowed to make decisions utilizing is maximizing shareholder value. So you really don't have that kind heart, and mission doesn't really have any protection when push comes to shove. So that's when we became more aware of the public benefit corporate structure as a way to protect that, because really what you're doing there is you're codifying in your corporate charter your mission, and it's called the public benefit statement. And it not only allows you to, but requires you to make decisions weighing that in addition to maximizing shareholder value. So you get out of the situation where you're in the boardroom and a cranky shareholder says, you're shirking your fiduciary responsibility because you left $1 on the table because you didn't club that baby seal. And you say, well, I don't like clubbing baby seals. They're too bad. You look at the corporate charter, that's, there was $1 there and you didn't take it. So this actually gives you real protections to protect that in the long term. And that's ultimately why we decided on public benefit corporate structure.
Has that, before y'all registered as a B Corp, did you see that reality playing out where there were decisions that you and your co-founders were thinking about making or considering making, or your board was pushing you to make, where you said this may be in the best interest of our company in a fiduciary sense, but this doesn't align with our core values? Was that you guys ever sort of rubber meet the road with that?
No, not for us, because we were so early in our journey. So we
Gotcha.
founded as a team and incorporated, and very quickly went out and did a Series A fundraise with a half dozen venture capital firms and dozens of individual investors. And so we never really got to times being tough.
Sure.
But after we raised the money is when we decided how are we going to protect that over the long term, and that's when we converted. But we had the challenge of then returning to all of our new shareholders who just gave us money and explain to them why we wanted to change from a C Corp, which everybody knew and understood, into something new that very few people were familiar with. So there was a lot of education that we had to do. Unfortunately, there are some public examples like Patagonia and Kickstarter, prominent companies that have a social identity and are successful, not despite of it, but in some cases because of it. And educate them, and we were able to get 100% shareholder approval to convert into a public benefit corporation.
That's awesome. Yeah. Professor, that's a founder's perspective on the benefits of a B Corp. Is there other top-line benefits or appeals to B Corps that we should be aware of from a legal perspective or from an outside of founder perspective?
Okay, good. So first, let me say, so that's a very important question, but first let me say that now that the legislator has given you this opportunity, the ball is in your court. Seize this opportunity, use it, both to maximize value, but also to enhance the social welfare. And the act is designed in a way that is very flexible and permissive. And also it protects management and protects the shareholders. So it's your turn. Fill this with content and do good and enhance social welfare. And so what are the other benefits for the perspective of a public benefit corporation? So the law is not separated from the business. At least that is, as the professor in my tower, I do believe that I'm still connected, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. And that's why we have great representatives that help us keep connected and updated. And what we do in the law is change things to fit better what we need. And that is exactly what this legislation is doing. There was a need, and this fills the gap. So absolutely it comes to help entrepreneurs, even if you go backwards, even before a company is already a company that is incorporated and doing well, and then it has to reincorporate it into a public benefit corporation. It's often the case that we have an entrepreneur who has a mission, is mission driven, and they need money to grow. Often we see situations where they're thinking, okay, now if I'm going to raise money, I'm jeopardizing my mission, because I know now that I'll have to maximize the profit, but I really want to protect my employees. So they hesitate, and they don't grow, and they wait before they raise the money. They don't want to lose control, because losing control means that they can no longer care for the community if there is some contradiction with the goal of maximizing profits. So that's where now we have this change. Now with public benefit corporations, that's no longer a problem. If you do it correctly, you can solve this problem. It's also Matt sort of alluded to it, there's also here an issue of not just, it's very good for the community, it's very good for social welfare, but it's also good for competing. Like if you think about Austin and Texas, if we want to compete with other corporations in California or in New York, and they are promising their employees, look, we care about employees so much so that we actually have that in our charter. And then we have a Texan corporation that, is just maximizing profits for the shareholders. Everything else equal, where will you prefer to work? Right? So to compete better, to compete for investors, employees, customers who are who care about society, who are socially minded, we really need this legislation, because that helps us act on the same way that companies now in California are doing that. So that's a new situation. That's going to change.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I never really thought about the talent perspective, right? Of where does the talent go? And we're 5 minutes into this, and I hope everyone leaves this room thinking, how do we make every corporation a B Corp now, right? Representative Hinojosa, what were those? Was talent something that came up when you were getting this bill through the session? What were the stories that you were hearing from founders or investors or what have you about why does this bill matter for Texas at the end of the day?
So I have the University of Texas in my district.
Mm-hmm.
I have a very young constituent base, and I have to acknowledge Chelsea O'Hara, who was the person on staff who really made this happen. This was her work, and so I just wanted. She also put this event together. But I bug her because I know I look it, but I'm really not a millennial. And so I'm always going to her and asking, Chelsea, what are the millennials like? What do y'all think about this and that?
What are those darndest millennials thinking?
That's right. And so this was actually brought to me by someone, Tom, you connected me to, Zoe
Schlag,
who brought the concept to me, and a young millennial business type, and I didn't understand what she was talking about. And it sounded like some granola, California concept that just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So, but what I was thinking about, I thought, the millennials must like this stuff. And so I talked to Chelsea. I said, Chelsea, we got a law school here. Call up the law school, see if we can find a professor to help us figure out whether this makes sense. And then at some point it just clicked to me that it's a win-win-win-win. I mean, it's a win for our very smart population here in Austin that is very socially minded, but looking also to advance in the business world. And it's a win in a state where, and more in a country where we are failing to invest in our communities, right? In this state, we just went through a brutal legislative session and then a more brutal special session. And I will always believe that government has a responsibility to do certain things in society, but when it abdicates its responsibility, as we have here in Texas, for instance, in education, we could really use the help of the private sector to make some of these investments. And even hopefully when the tide turns and pendulum swings and we are better at investing in our future in this state, there will always be a place for that private partnership
Mhm.
in social issues that are important. So yeah, it kind of checks all the boxes in
Sure.
terms of making sense for sure for the community I represent.
Matt, now that we have the legislation now, right? So we should all go out and start B Corps. What did you hear in the boardroom when you guys were considering re-registering as a B Corp? And what were you hearing specifically from your venture guys? What were investors saying about this decision?
Yeah, it's a great question. They wanted to understand how would it impact our prospects.
Sure.
Right? They have written a check already in the scenario where we had just concluded our Series A. They wanted to get better educated. And they wanted to see, just like case law, they wanted to know examples of venture-funded technology companies that had done well. And so we were able to point to some of those examples. And very interestingly, so I mentioned that we had venture capital firms from Silicon Valley and other locations. Some of them were actually very familiar with it and said, oh yeah, we've invested before.
Oh,
Others
wow.
had no idea.
Okay.
And you basically, it's like even in, sometimes even more in venture capital, there's a certain like herd mentality. So you can
Definitely.
point and say, well, Andreessen Horowitz had just invested, $100 million in Laureate Education or Sequoia. So you point to other firms that have made this decision. So like, most things, there's some social proof that you can lean on. So they wanted to be certain that we weren't limiting our prospects in terms of additional rounds of funding, in terms of additional development by going this route. So we had to do an education process there.
Did anyone ever push back and say you are limiting your prospects by this? I mean, was there anyone who, whoa, we don't know if you can be a successful corporation as a B Corp?
We had some people who challenged us more out of lack of familiarity
Okay.
than out of deep knowledge.
Sure.
So when they would push back, we were prepared with examples of companies much better known than us that had great success as a public benefit corporation, as a B Corp. So that was pretty critical. And then we were also able to paint a picture, again, of deep alignment between our maximizing shareholder value in the long term and our public benefit statement, which is if truly our public benefit statement being democratizing access to data and accelerating the open data movement, which is bringing the world's data out of its various silos onto one platform that everything's easily discoverable, they start being like, oh, so you're kind of like Google for data then. And we're like, yeah, like
Sure.
that,
Yeah.
right? And then they're like, then they start, so you have to do a lot of it in framing in terms of things that they know.
Sure. Professor, are you seeing at a national level, right? Obviously, at Texas, we'll see hopefully a growth of the B Corp sector. Are you seeing at the national level? I think it's probably been about maybe 15 years that B Corps have really started to uptick in familiarity. You see more groups in Silicon Valley taking B Corps on. Are we seeing a national trend towards increased incorporation as a B Corp? Is it happening?
Yeah, so I think the most important change has been when Delaware has introduced
Sure.
a public benefit corporation option. And once we have that, and also personally, sort of, if you ask me, the Delaware statute is so much better than the other options that we had. So that is a new game, a game changer. And that's why Texas is following Delaware example and is much friendlier, much more protective of both investors and the management, and keeps the flexibility with the corporation so that profits can be really maximized while enhancing the social benefit. So that has been a huge change, and that is only about 4 years.
Gotcha.
2013, I believe. We have only one public corporation, that is public benefit corporation. So there, once we'll have more of that, that will be another hurdle. But there are quite a few private companies who choose this path, and definitely there is an increase
Sure.
with that.
Representative, when you think about, so obviously we want B Corps to make a splash in Texas, right? We want more new companies here in Texas to be registering as B Corps. What are you thinking, and I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but when you think about next legislative session or working sort of in public-private partnerships as you just referenced, and what's the future legislative prospects of how Texas incentivizes new corporations to register as B Corps, but also how Texas, the state, incentivizes itself to work with B Corps and encourage sort of a B Corp friendly environment in Texas. How do we make that splash?
Well, I'll say that, to be honest, we did get some pushback on pursuing this legislation, and this had been tried in a previous session. We had been talking about this, and some within kind of the business law community were not quite comfortable with this. And so for now, and we work closely with different groups to get everybody on board and to get this passed. And I also want to acknowledge Professor Gaynor. She essentially wrote the law, and she always, I think you're afraid something, like we did something wrong and then we're going to blame you, but no.
It's a good looking law. It's a good looking law.
But the credit is all
Oh, well,
here.
thanks. You're extremely modest, but so we modeled it after the Delaware statute. And so at this point, I just want to see how this plays out. I don't want to make plans yet for next session. I want to give this some time so that people can see that this is a good thing, and people, really, I want to spread the word.
Yeah.
Is what I want to do now, and that's why we have this panel, because I want people to understand this. It's a new concept, and I would just like to see this grow.
Sure.
For now.
If I may add here, is that we don't necessarily want every business entity to be formed as a public benefit corporation. There are people who are doing really well and will do really well as a traditional corporation. But for those who really need that, we need to give them this option, and we need to give this option here rather than go to California or go to Delaware.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, spread the word, because it does fit certain type of entrepreneurs, and those entrepreneurs should take it and not the others, because if those right people take it, they will do well, and if they do well, then others will follow. We don't want somebody just to take it and abuse it, or, I mean, it's hard to abuse it because of the way that it's written, but not get the right benefit from it, and then, okay, what did we do it for? We want people who really can go and run with it, and once we have more good examples, like we already have one, albeit in Delaware, then that will give the benefit to Texas, to our community, to Austin.
Mm-hmm. And I can't help but think spaces like this one, Capital Factory, as well as all of the other ones that we have here in Austin, Galvanize, and so on and so forth, right? These are all ultimately people who are trying to opt into, frankly, a pretty crappy lifestyle at the beginning, being an entrepreneur, to try to change the world and do good
It's full
things.
of possibilities.
Yeah, you dream very, very little because you don't sleep much, but your dreams are amazing.
Exactly.
Matt, I'm wondering, sort of, Austin Tech, for better and worse, is a tight-knit group, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's, right, everyone knows the Dan Grahams and the Brett Hertz, and right, everyone knows these guys. Are you seeing, is this percolating up in sort of these rooms, right? Are tech guys getting more excited about the prospect that there's this new way to talk about doing business, and really a new way to talk about doing the social impact entrepreneurship that so many people in Austin come to Austin specifically to start? Are you seeing that sort of the information about B Corps and the possibilities therein beginning to spread across this ecosystem?
Yeah, it's the beginnings.
Sure, and
of
surely
the
Data.World
process.
is helping, right?
And as one of the top 10 most funded public benefit corporations in technology ever, right? And we're a prominent example of it. You can go this route if you're looking for a certain model, and a lot of people that do technology and internet follow a certain model of funding. It's like, this is a possibility, and somebody prominent like my co-founder, Brett Hurt, who has successfully created companies including Bizarre Voice and Coremetrics, is an example of like, well, back to the social proof point. We're all like trying to, do these cognitive shortcuts of looking at examples of people that we consider to be smarter than ourselves having done something a certain way, and it somewhat validates the notion. The more you have these public examples out there, the easier it's going to be for other people to make that decision themselves, because the path has been blazed a bit. And I think Capital Factory has a great opportunity because it provides so much educational content.
Definitely.
So that these kind of seedlings of entrepreneurs in town will really learn that what's possible there. And back to your point, Representative Hinojosa, around the millennials, what they care about is meaning in their work. If you look at it, it's always hard to stereotype any group, but there are surveys of millennials, and disproportionately they care about the purpose of their work above other things. So being able to have that connection, I think, is very powerful. And for us, it actually really has been a differentiator in recruiting too. People that are truly exceptional in what they do have options by definition. And if you're one of many options for them to where they're going to spend their time, you paint the picture of like, yes, we're doing something pioneering and transformative, and you can be on this journey, and it's something that really matters, and we're not just saying it by painting something fancy on the wall about what our values are. Like, we've actually incorporated that way. You can look us up in Delaware at a corporate charter and see and read what we put in there about what we matter, and that's been a differentiator in getting some of Austin's best talent to join us.
But so this is interesting, right? I think one of the fascinating things about this is obviously there's a lot of questions about how do we educate founders like yourself and the talent that's out there about, right? B Corps are out there and they're a good thing. Professor, I'm wondering if you can talk about a little bit the tension of board members who are used to a traditional corporate environment coming into this new B Corp environment where they have to balance not only the fiduciary bottom line, but also the mission. Is there a tension there, right? Have we sort of seen board members not get that entirely? But then also, what does board director education look like to get their heads wrapped around the benefits of registering as a B Corp?
Okay, so usually the choice is made to be a B Corp, and sort of you recruit the directors who are
Into that
particular mission, so they are already on board. Having said that, let me just say that the act itself is so flexible that this balancing is not something that you have one size fits all, right? It allows you to do it really in the way that fits your corporation. So I don't see so much, sort of in my mind, I don't see so much friction with the board actually doing that, because it shouldn't be that difficult for a corporation to do this balancing, because it's not unlike any other business decision. So yeah, sure, you have a lot of financial theories of how to maximize profits, but at the end of the day, how do you maximize profits, right? You give a lot of deference to the board in doing that, and the courts give a lot of deference to the court in doing that, and will not usually replace its own business judgment, replace the business judgment of the board with that of the court. Same thing here, this balancing act, especially under the legislation that we have here now in Texas, it doesn't say, look, you have to do it in a certain way, and these are the weights that you are assigned, and that would have caused a lot of friction.
Sure.
But you keep it really in a way that you can fit it to what the particular company needs. So it's not necessarily that I'll say, okay, 30% public benefit, 30% we also need to take into account the effects of the act on any material effect on anybody else, 30% that, and then the rest is maximizing the profits. No, that doesn't work. Intentionally, that's not what the legislator meant. The idea here is that you have to take it into account, but we leave that discretion to the board to do it in a way that really fits. And how do you do that? Really case specific. So you can come up with certain situations, but it's not something that is really imposed, and that lowers the frictions and really enables you to tailor it to the particular needs.
Sure.
And if I can just add to that, there's a section in the law that says the standard for figuring out the balance. As the professor said, it provides lots of latitude. It says, with respect to a decision implicating the balance requirement, a director of a public benefit corporation is considered to have satisfied the director's duties to shareholders and corporation if the director's decision is both informed and disinterested and is not a decision that no person of ordinary sound judgment would approve. So it's very flexible. There are some statutes that require a third party to audit. We were talking about this earlier. The public benefit
Mhm.
and the whatever has been achieved for that public benefit. We purposefully did not include that in the statute. Again, because of some concerns we had
Sure.
in amongst stakeholders, but also because we want to make this easy
Yep.
and accessible and not scary, so we can get this started and get people interested in starting public benefit corporations.
Matt, just out of curiosity, have you all ever gone through sort of a B Corp certification process or any kind of third-party audit like that, or is that,
Yeah, we have.
so what was that like?
Personally, I was not on the front line of that
Sure.
whole process, so there's extensive paperwork, which I saw secondhand and contributed to certain questions, but it's pretty rigorous, and as a public benefit corporation, at regular intervals, you have to report how you're progressing and living your public benefit statement. So it's not just you get to state it once, you actually have a continuing obligation to really measure and report your progress against that.
Sure. Well, I guess so, and kind of wrapping up and final thoughts, and then we'll get to some questions from the audience. I guess so, like, we have this super flexible law, right? And everyone should go take advantage of it. What's the founder to founder,
Mhm.
right? What's the framing, right? You should start a B Corp because blank. What do you say to people when you're encouraging them to take advantage of this
Yeah.
option?
So I guess I would boil it down to three things. One is if your mission is true, it gives you the legal structure to protect that in the long run, particularly if you have multiple shareholders,
Mhm.
right? It's not just you as a single owner making the decisions that you're taking. You have multiple founders, you're taking external money. This actually allows you to codify and protect that mission over time, which I think is critically important. I think it is a differentiator in recruiting. If you're really going out there to get the best talent, you're able to attract certain high performers because you have your mission codified and it's meaningful, and it's, again, not just, I don't mean to minimize it, but it's very fashionable to have a mission that you talk about that's socially oriented, but the truth of the matter is it's there until it gets under pressure in the boardroom, and then it's not there anymore. So it's a recruiting advantage, and then the third one is frankly just like cold calculation. It's actually an advantage in certain partnership situations. So if you're partnering with certain companies, and in our case, we are building a platform. We have governments that are distributing their open data on our platform. We have universities that are adopting us for usage, nonprofits that utilize us as their podium for sharing data about their cause. The fact that if they look at us through one lens, we're just another, greedy looking, capitalistic Silicon Valley venture-backed company. Why would they want to do business with us? This is actually kind of our street cred that we're not that
Mhm.
we're actually something more. So it's back to you're really protecting your mission, so that's very true. Recruiting is an advantage, and the third one is that frankly it can be an advantage in certain partnership situations.
Sounds awesome. Let's do it.
Yes, I know.
yeah. Representative,
Thanks.
same question. What do you and your colleagues at the Ledge, what are next steps for all of us to help encourage founders to take advantage of this new corporation type in Texas?
Well, I think just basic concept, I don't think people know what it is.
Sure.
I think that's actually why we were able to pass it. The board bits and legislators were like, yeah, I guess.
Sure, why not?
I totally disagree.
You do?
It's a great legislation.
No, that's right, you're right. It's great legislation, but I do think that people don't quite understand it. And really, it's a pretty basic concept. For me as a lawyer, what made it finally click was having taken a corporations class in law school, though that's not my practice, but knowing about, well, this protects you from shareholder liability for pursuing something other than profits. It's like a basic concept of corporate law that most people understand, and so I think to frame it in that way, that's why this makes sense, helps it click. And I just think this is what people want to do. I mean, I think maybe disproportionately millennials are looking for that greater purpose in their work, but I think really all of us are to an extent. And so this allows people to pursue meaning in work and all, but not sacrifice really or jeopardize doing well to do good, right?
Sure.
So I don't see a downside to it, and I just think it's about letting people know that this is an option that exists now in Texas. And so, just to be clear, whereas you could always go and incorporate in another state and do business here, now you're a Texas corporation, and so subject to Texas laws, we'll create our own body of law surrounding this new statute, and we won't have to travel to litigate since you're incorporated somewhere else. And so there are lots of benefits to having your corporation be a Texas corporation if you're here. So it's just convenience, but it also allows corporations to pursue what a lot of us are looking for.
Before that, if I could just
Yeah,
make,
sure.
One clarification. Yes, it's a very flexible piece of legislation, but also under our act, we need to file a report biannually. So before we talked about this report. So this report is sent under Texas law. It's sent only to the shareholders. It doesn't have to be public, and we don't need any third-party approval or to pay for any third-party review of that report. But we still have a few requirements, which include this once in 2 years a report to the shareholders. That explains pretty much what you're doing with the public benefit. And another thing is what the representative said before. It's a good idea that you follow the requirements and just, as a board, keep yourself informed, and then you'll be fine. So these two things you still need to do, even though it is very permissible and you can do almost everything else, provided you do these two things.
What questions do y'all have for us? Yeah.
I have just a couple of thoughts. I'm just curious, did you go through, before you decided to file in Delaware, did you decide to take a look at B Labs, B corporations, the certification process as opposed to benefits corporations?
Right.
Because my sense is that, they're a lot more rigorous with the assessment that you talked about. And in a lot of instances, these benefits corporations show up, they're completely toothless because they don't have the third-party auditors. And we run a risk of it being kind of like a few years ago when everything was green and there were all these environment, and then people got sick of that. So if we don't have the social responsibility programs, do you have programs in your company to support the underpinnings of the formation documents? Then they kind of lose their oomph pretty quick. So, as we go out with this, which I'm so excited that it's finally come about, if it's just something in the articles of formation, but it doesn't have all the other stuff that comes around it, it looks like cause marketing. It's just marketing. It doesn't actually show. So I'm just wondering if you put thought into that and what conclusions you
Except that
came to.
shareholders can always require that of the corporation. They can always require a third-party audit. And so that's always still a possibility. It's just not a requirement of the
Right.
law.
Exactly, it's not mutually exclusive, and on top of that, it's very difficult to undo it. Not very difficult, but difficult to move from a public benefit corporation to a traditional corporation. On the other hand, you are B Corp certified 1 year, you just don't pay the next year, and that's it. So actually, I would argue that there are more protections if you are incorporated as a public benefit corporation,
Mhm.
because you still have to follow the public benefit.
Yeah,
I-
I
I'm-
suppose I was talking about the view from the public out there, because if you don't have those things coming in requiring you to constantly assess and stuff, sometimes
Oh, you are required.
you let the programs go. I mean, your board goes it, but I mean, from the consumer out there, I just wondered, you know, it seems like you have to have a lot of stuff
Yeah.
so that it stands up and people still believe in it, more than just the articles of formation.
Not to jump in,
No,
but
I
yeah,
just-
as
I'm
someone who's
just-
like,
I'm
right, so.
throwing open just dialogue.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's interesting about your point from the perspective that I'm bringing, which like I've never, like, I'm a nonprofit guy, right? The paradigm that you're describing, which exists, and just for some of y'all who don't know, right, there's organizations out there that basically certify B Corps, right? They go around and they audit B Corps, and they basically act to keep them honest and making sure that they're fulfilling the mission that they've sort of pledged to do as a B Corp. And I think what's always been really interesting to me, and what I appreciate about the flexibility in the bill here as well as in Delaware, is like that's more paperwork and stuff than I have to do as an IRS certified 501c3, right? People can give me money and get a tax write-off for it, and like I don't have to talk to the IRS basically ever again once I get that letter, right? And I think and you can probably speak to this as well about the paperwork. It's and you mentioned it as well, Representative, the sort of regulatory barriers there. At some point as a founder, it's just like, well, why, you know, I can have a public benefit and still be a C Corp and I'll sleep fine at night and I just won't have to do all this
No,
paperwork,
it's
you know?
expensive. I would
Yeah.
agree with that. It is expensive for Mr. Rini and the auditors.
It's an interesting point though about sort of the marketing aspect of
But
it,
the
right?
marketing aspect is, I mean, people come and they say you are, but it's just in a piece of paper, so if you don't have a strong social responsibility in-house program behind it, it loses its glow.
Yeah,
So
you
it's more like-
always gotta walk the walk,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But, you know, we're big fans of B Labs as well and our certified B Corp. There's a great deal of confusion around certified B Corp from B Labs, which is kind of a good housekeeping seal. You fill out an extensive survey and you kind of get scored in a number of different dimensions, which is a public signal around being a certain type of company. And they are very rigorous about maintaining that score. So but you can lose it in a given year and it really doesn't change too much. And then there's the public benefit corporation, which is a corporate type, which is a legal corporate structure, and you codify that. And I actually think there's a bit of a wonderful pairing between the two. They both enable different things, and the group at B Labs really by kind of creating the structure of B Corp and really kind of started a movement here, and through that movement and through direct action that they took, helped get the ball rolling on the state level around the creation of public benefit corporations. So they're for me, it's definitely not an either or. There's very much kind of the same intent, and for us, we're both.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Brandy.
Just for a quick clarification on that, so to be a B Lab certified B Corp, you have to be a public benefit corporation in some state, right?
No?
You could just be any form of business. Okay, so then if you are a benefit corporation, you don't obviously have to be certified by B Lab. They're just separate things. You could do both, but you don't have to. They're not required. So if you go the benefit corporation route, does the company, is that itself a structure, or could you be an LLC benefit corporation, or some other? What does it behave like in the corporate world? Is it more like a C Corp or a LLC or a S Corp or
The certificate, the B certificate?
Public benefit
When you
corporation.
incorporate as a,
Okay, a public benefit corporation, the new legislation, that's a corporation, that's more like a C Corp.
more
In
like?
addition, it allows you not just to focus on maximizing your profits, but also focus on the specific public benefit that you chose.
Yeah, and the way I kind of, my quick and dirty explanation, and correct me where I'm missing some nuance here, is when people ask me about it, it's like, it is exactly like a C Corp for taxation and governance and all intents and purposes. The difference is you are codifying your mission, which gives you the right and obligation and protection to make decisions utilizing that mission. That's the only difference.
That's right.
Can they look at these?
Record that.
yep,
Of the 30 states, what does the research show of the companies or content areas that are predisposed to this
structure?
That's a great question.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Like for data.world, I'm like, oh, that's data. Like, I don't know.
I don't know.
Professor, have you-
answers to that.
Yeah, have you seen any trends nationally in sort of what types of companies opt into B Corps?
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is that we have yet to see more public companies because there's only one public traded company. So for now, it's mostly privately held corporations.
And I'll say the statute defines, it says public benefit means a positive effect or reduction of a negative effect on one or more categories of persons, entities, communities of interest, or other shareholders in their capacity as shareholders of corporation, including effects of an artistic, charitable, cultural, economic, educational, environmental, literary, medical, religious, scientific, or technological in nature. So, including those areas, but I don't know what the tendency,
And just,
and that's not, that is not to exclude others, but.
Exactly, it can be everything.
and just anecdotally, I think there's a growing social impact entrepreneurship sector in sort of startup land. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of folks are realizing, I think the traditional math that young people like me have to make when they're graduating college and they want to go do something is I'm going to start a C Corp or an LLC and I'm going to try to make it, or I'm going to start a nonprofit and like, let's see how long I can make it, right? And I
Yeah.
think the B Corp is a really nice balance that actually gives people who want to have impact in their work a way to kind of feel like more of a traditional corporation and not like they're sort of shackled with being a nonprofit, which does curtail a lot of sort of what you can do, even though you are a business entity at the end of the day.
And one thing that I think is really interesting as a companion trend is the increase in social impact investing. There's more and more capital that are going into venture funds specifically oriented towards social impact
Yep.
companies.
And those guys won't invest in nonprofits, right? And that's one of the things that I think B Corps helps get us around. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask regarding like in the past we have different type of vehicle investment, like a limited partnership, and then we have a C corporation, and we come out with something LLC.
Yep.
Which is something like in the between of it. So a question is like with the B Corp, but you set it up, is like something new like LLC, or is that under the corporation? It's like the C and the S, and now we have the B Corp.
Yep.
Is that so? Is it still under under the law? Is still like a corporation when you go to the legal?
So it's
Yes.
a corporation that makes an election to be a public benefit corporation. And it can make an election to be either a C or an S corporation.
Okay.
So to make it simple, it's a corporation that chose to be a B Corp.
Okay.
I was curious to know a little bit more about the costs associated with becoming a public benefit corporation, because I suppose I've heard that it can be prohibitively expensive for some like social impact entrepreneurs or startups.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'd love to just hear more about it and maybe ways that becoming a public benefit corporation can be incentivized in Austin.
Well, so, not knowing anything about this, except, I haven't pursued a public benefit corporation, so I don't, but my guess is, it wouldn't be I wouldn't think it would be any different than being a regular corporation unless you're gonna be certified.
Yeah. And
Go through the certification process, which apparently is costly.
And that's where the sort of ominous costs come from, is this third-party certification process, which until very recently, I mean, Delaware 4 years ago, right? I mean, until very recently, getting a third-party sort of auditor to declare you a B Corp was really the best way to do it, because ultimately, if you want to sell your corporation, you're incorporating in Delaware, right? And there's, you gotta do that, right?
Yeah, so I think the additional cost is very minuscule, so you need to do this report once every 2 years, but you don't need to go outside for that. You need to keep yourself informed. That's not really, definitely not prohibitive of anything, so it's definitely not that expensive.
And and not to take too much over as the moderator, but in terms of incentivizing, and I'm absolutely coming to your office next session with this, right? I mean, cities and states make a decision all the time to favor companies for certain characteristics, right? Minority-owned businesses is the perfect example of this. And we could have the same type of regulatory structure encouraging B Corps to partner with states and cities. And like,
San Francisco did that.
who the hell wouldn't want that to happen, right? Like, and so, anyways, the second bill, there you go.
I knew that was coming.
Did you have a
Yeah, I
question?
mean, it's,
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
don't know, just kind of thinking, I mean, it's interesting, like you
Yeah.
do, maybe there's an subsidy offer to help with the incorporation fees, but like, I wouldn't want there to be more of an incentive for companies to do that, because then people are gonna claim it for economic reasons as
Definitely.
opposed to true reasons. So maybe you can subsidize some of the incorporation initial setup costs as kind of like a one-time helping hand, but you wouldn't wanna have any ongoing tax benefit, otherwise you're kind of creating some perverse incentives there.
Definitely.
Are your company B Corp or?
Yeah, we're a public benefit corp, and then we also have the B Corp stamp through B Labs as well,
Okay.
so.
So, when you make the decision, why don't you decide B Corp instead of just the C Corp that have the B Lab certification? And what makes you choose like doing either or both?
Well, the public benefit corporation structure gives, kind of the protection and governance that we discussed. And then the B Corp is a little bit more of a broader, and then that's like you have a singular statement, your public benefit corporation, which is your singular statement. And you have a great deal of flexibility on how you choose and articulate that. Whereas B Lab certification for B Corp, which is not a legal structure, it's just kind of the good housekeeping seal, is a much broader, like more multi-dimensional survey, right? Is that how you would characterize it?
But they also request that you do your articles, right? They also request that you change your articles of information to include a social purpose. Right?
B Labs?
B
B
Labs.
Labs? I believe they do, but I imagine that wasn't.
I
That-
believe
and
it's
that's what-
changed,
that was
it's
my original
changed a
question,
lot
how
in
does-
recent
when you
years.
start thinking which way,
It's changed a lot in recent years, because again, they were the really pioneering there, and when they got started, their public benefit corporation really largely didn't exist.
Yeah.
And they're slowly trying to get more of their B Lab certified companies to convert. So I'm
Yeah.
not fully versed in
I'm
how
still
they've done
very
that, but.
clear about your answer because like, for example, C Corp and S Corp, one of the difference is like the number of the stockholders. The C Corp is like a lot more, and then the S Corp is like a limited, like to certain numbers. So what is B Corp? Is like under the C Corp, or is like something different? And then what is all those other things?
Okay.
And then does it have implication when you go to the court system? They treat you as a C Corp, or they treat you as like a B Corp, which is that no past of the case
Yeah.
happening and things like that.
Okay, so a C Corp or an S Corp is actually an election that you make with the IRS, right? And you're right that you have to qualify to actually be able to elect to be treated as an S Corp. That still apply whether you are a public benefit corporation or a traditional corporation. That is yet another election that you can choose.
And just to clarify, so you could elect to be a C Corp as well as a public benefit corporation.
Right,
Those
so-
are
so-
two
so-
separate elections that you make.
Right, absolutely. So the default is a C Corp, you elect to be an S Corp provided that you qualify.
Yep.
So you could elect to be an S Corp and a public benefit corporation, or
That-
be a C Corp and a public benefit
You
corporation.
could be an LLC and a public benefit corporation.
No.
No, because an
So
LLC
LLC
is not a corporation.
Okay.
I'm sorry, real quick, do you still
Yeah, I
want
was
to ask
just
your
gonna
question?
Yeah,
ask a
sorry.
question about, how long does that process take for the Secretary of State, for example, if we apply for it? And then the second question was, are there any differences in tax purposes? Like I know 501c3 is tax exempt, but C
Sure.
Corps are not, so is there any differences in taxation?
No differences
No
in
difference in
taxation.
Yep.
Similar to C? And
It is a
long-
C.
It is a C.
It-
And
yeah,
how
g-
long does it take?
Same amount as a C Corp.
C Corp. okay.
Yep, because again, like, you're just starting a corporation,
Right.
and then you're just saying, I want to be a C Corp, and I also want to be a public benefit corporation. So again, it's just things that happen when you're writing your charter. Yes, Brandon? Oh, sorry, and actually, the person next to you had a question.
Go ahead, Jen.
I guess,
hearing this discussion, and I really respect what B Lab has done to really bring this even to the forefront. I appreciate that as corporations, you don't necessarily want all the paperwork. It's just, it's an extra expense for young corporations. I would like to see more subsidies going towards not more paperwork, but more structure, like a resilient, regenerative structure coming up underneath these corporations so that you can keep them sustaining their mission, that you have a more systems thinking approach to, you know, not just your vision of your mission, but you're making sure that your employees are living the mission. You make sure there's other, does that make sense? Like actually subsidizing the kind of certification that B Lab offers, I think is really important, because otherwise we could lose the importance of it. And from a data point of view, what B Lab offers is a justification of how it's working, you know, in our world.
Any response?
What? I'm just looking forward to being able to do this in Texas, and I think I just want to give it space and time and see how this evolves and what it becomes in this state. And I was at a hearing today, not at all related to this House hearing on this legislation, and the chairman, it's criminal justice legislation, the chairman, who's been around over 20 years, said, yeah, we had to come back to this and tweak this 10 years later because we missed this part. And I don't know, I think we're just gonna have to wait and see what happens here and give this the time to, we may have missed some things and we may have to come back eventually, but I think for now, I'm just glad that we have this option here in this state. But so I appreciate the feedback, but I think we'll be getting, as the years go on, we'll be getting additional feedback.
No, I think that's a great idea, because from like the technology world, we like to put things out and then see how people utilize it to inform how we make the next kind of iteration on it, right?
Yeah.
So as opposed to building on top of it too early before we've had really the testing feedback and data, frankly, and then figuring out, okay, what's the way to really make this go in the next level? We don't know quite yet.
So what, sorry.
In the legislation, is there a conversion provision to take a nonprofit and move it into the B Corp?
No.
And that,
Yeah, not directly, but you can always do it indirectly. So you first convert into a regular corporation, and a regular corporation can convert into a public benefit corporation,
and
right? So if you think about it, a non-profit can convert it into a regular corporation, right?
Great pains.
A corporation can elect to be a public benefit corporation. You just do it into steps.
Okay, it's a phased approach, but it's not in the legislation. Where is the legislation available to read in totality?
so there's
Right
a
there.
there's a
That's
great
our copy.
website called Texas Legislature Online,
Okay,
and the bill number for y'all who are curious is HB 3488.
I never remember my bill number.
Oh yeah, I know. It's impossible. Any other? Yeah, Brandy.
A couple follow-ups. So someone said plural certification bodies. Is there anybody besides B Lab who's certifying B Corp?
Not B Corps.
I think there's one other.
Is there? No, no, okay. And then I just wanted to sort of echo or reinforce the idea of the recruitment strategy, because I was a speaker at a recent Net Impact dinner, and these are people who are, you know, either as MBAs or young professionals are consciously looking for companies to align with that are, you know, socially responsible, environmentally responsible, out to do something good in the world. And it's a good way to get invited to conferences where it's basically free advertising for your company. Like you get to go and speak and represent good business practices and behavior and goals and things like that. And you have a whole bunch of people basically self-selected and kind of like they're going to look at the B Corps first. Can I get a job with one of these companies that's declared I want to do something good versus just getting a job with any other company in the world?
Yep, absolutely.
Well, thanks y'all so much for coming. And I'm sure panelists will stick around if there's folks who want to talk about this more. Thanks,
And
y'all.
thank you, Tom, for
Yeah.
being such a great moderator.
Just here to
I
help.
really appreciate you facilitating the conversation. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, man, great to meet you.
Yeah, you too. I don't know if I do. It's funny, I was realizing that when I came out, I do not have anything in this card. Hi, Paul. How are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. You're with Data World?
Data.world.
Data.world. What countries were you?
Yes.
Okay. Krishna Srinivasa?
Yes.
You know him? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm working with him on that. We're considering.
Oh, that's amazing.
We have a 501c. It's nothing with our fund.
Yeah.
Oh, that is like.
Yeah, you know, Live Oak is one of our investors that we think they're well, they weren't our initial. So yeah, we're big fans of Novus.
One quick question is, I'm from Texas. Is on board, bringing raises it by Delaware versus
I just thought.
I don't know, like I was chatting to the professor a little bit beforehand. It's like there's for companies that have aspirations around maybe going public one day or maybe getting acquired in a big M&A deal, there's reasons why you would be in Delaware. But if you don't have those aspirations, there's cost and document advantages for being only, you know, if you're based in Texas to be incorporated.
I'm looking up how
That's
to
maybe a simplified answer.
before they figure out what we're trying
Matt.
to stop.
Nice to meet you.
Sure.
Yeah,
Email
absolutely.
and then phone number. So
I'm
we have
challenged
one
with.
of the companies that we try to provide open registration platform.
I'm sure that I.
Social benefits.
Are you sure?
First service
Yeah, now that I have it all.
help you to the East Coast.
Oh, yeah?
So
That's great.
might be fit these things.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. And I wonder, I also want to check with you and see what's the best way to get to your company to get like the data about logistics in general,
Like what type of logistics?
like a delivering or like helping food for people.
Well, you know,
The last mile, logistics for the last mile.
I don't know whether we have any public data on that. You know, we have a fair bit of transportation data on the platform. So, I mean, it's free to sign up, so you can go and sign up and use search and look around at our transportation data. We've got quite a bit of data. We have, the city of Austin publishes most of their open data on our platform.
So it's like a data from Capital Metro and things like this on your platform.
I think so. There's the Department of Transportation, Texas Department of Transportation.
They're different. They're different.
Yeah.
The Austin version is different.
Yeah.
than Capital Metro.
Thank you so much.
I don't know, but there's a chance. So, great. It's nice meeting you.
Yeah. So how is your schedule look like? I mean, like you've been busy lately? Or?
Oh yeah, things are insane right now. Things are insane. But it's a pleasure meeting you. It's a pleasure meeting you. I enjoyed our conversation. Take care.
You know, prior to this section being passed, right, people got around it and using the social purpose language. Why did you guys think that was insufficient? Is it for the protection of stockholder shareholder liability?
So you, in theory,
Yeah, thank you.
can draft everything in the charter and hope that is recognized, because two things. The first of all, you have to do all this work that now is already done for ownership. Because that's one. You can work around it and you can rewrite your duties and rewrite the requirements yourself. Or in theory, you have to ownership. Another thing is that at least conservative reading or conservative courts will say, okay, that's very nice, it's written in the charter, but the fiduciary duty first of all is to shareholders, and especially in this end thing where you sell the company, you have revenue duties, and you're consenting for a little bit more Or you can sell it for a little bit less, but you know that the company that is a little bit more is going to fire all degrees and say piecemeal.
Yeah, and it's
You still have to
really
take that.
important structure for
So there is
companies that
a situation like that, that the core because
it's very,
some
very empowering to
conservative
be able to have that kind of
look at the
structure
revenue
to
duty,
protect
especially the
your
revenue
mission
duty,
and
something
balance
which
that.
is not around this
I think
duty.
it's a reverse incentive to start.
But there's a way to exit this, right?
Financially
I only
rewarding companies
glanced
to
very
leave.
quickly, I didn't have a chance to read the detail, but it seems like a shareholder vote of 2/3, you can get out of it, right? You can get
Well,
out
it was a pleasure. I look forward to seeing you around.
two-thirds vote, right? So you have a lot of companies.
But you have also raised it.
Yeah.
We don't want it to be something that's it, so you did it and you can never undo it.
Yeah.
Thirds is not so easy, it depends on
And
the.
so why did the appraisal rights didn't seem to apply to your local beach? Is that reading it wrong?
That is absolutely right, but that's usually the case. So if it's a publicly traded company, you have to mark it out, which is usually what you have. So it sort of mimics appraisal. I don't necessarily agree with this market out thing, but that's something that you have throughout appraisals and otherwise it will be meaningless.
So I was just curious, what was the pushback from people who were like part of, I guess, the business bar, who write the statute, review the statutes when it's about business regulation? You said you met with some resistance. It still passed, but what were their concerns?
Yeah, so I think the resistance was more in the past, which I wasn't involved a few years ago before. Also, they were sort of into this, we do something like in California that requires a third-party approval that is very strict, even things like that. I think now, once we explain to them that it's more like a Delaware type of flexible law, they were much more open to it, and that's right.
And so Delaware also has the periodic report requirement or no?
Absolutely, but this is very similar, as in almost virtually the Delaware statute.
Oh, really? Okay.
Absolutely. So there is a periodic report, but the difference is that it's only internal. You don't have to make it public. You don't need to have a third-party approval, but you still have to write it to the shareholders.
You know, a lot of private startups, they don't have stockholder meetings. They do everything by action, by written consent. Right? So if you never hold a shareholder meeting, are you then exempt from having to do a periodic? Yeah. So
you just send it to them.
So you would require that it says, okay.
The law requires you to send it to the shareholders.
Okay.
So the question of enforcement is a different one.
Yeah. So to one of the questions of the audience members, I don't know how you would be continually involved in this process, but I think the elements of reducing the friction of more companies knowing about it is getting the Secretary of State to provide the sample, right, for the certificate of formation, so that
put it on the website.
So they know how to do it. And then there's a nonprofit called Texas SEMA that for a long time they provided sample nonprofit articles of incorporation documents, articles, right? Now it's certificate of formation, sample bylaws. Similarly, right? If you get a place to people could download that reduces the friction. That also helps the new generation of lawyers become more educated and familiar with how to do this, because that's going to be one of your friction points. Is people have to go read the statute, right? They read the statute, but like, okay, how do you in practice implement that, right? So if you have sample forms in it, you remove some of the friction, remove some of the concerns about the costs, because every single lawyer has to learn how to do this. It raises the cost for the startup that has to create the, go find a lawyer to do that.
So like September 1st, is the Secretary of State ready for those kind of forms, or is it still like?
I don't know, but it's good law. So I don't know if they have to be, because it's good law. So, it's not so complicated. You just have to write in the statement that it is a public benefit corporation. and include.
So you don't need to do the reincorporating things, you just add, if you have a C corporation already, you just add a thing too, or is that, you have to go to Secretary of State, you reincorporate it?
No, I think
It's not you reincorporate, you still have to change the certificate and you still have to file it.
but it's just adding a statement, maybe a new
And then you have
article,
to
right?
pay
Exactly,
for the new,
yeah,
the same
exactly.
fee, like we reincorporate.
Well, it's just like you would amend a certificate.
Exactly, absolutely.
The same fee. So, in the course of this, did you create a sample set of like forms?
I did not, but it's actually just, as you said, you just add one article.
Right.
And just you write.
But in terms of a best practices approach, right? Like, are you recommending that you address it in some ways in the bylaws too, where they talk about directors?
When you talk about I was sort of, when you talk about the purpose, you have to write what is the public benefit that you choose. Public benefits that you choose. So that's where you have to add that. And of course you can elect to add things like eliminating liabilities, but you don't have to do anything except for adding just that public benefit, just at least one public benefits in the mix.
In the article of corporation,
Yes.
got bylaw and then it's open.
Bylaws is whatever, you don't have to do anything. And bylaws is fine.
Yeah, they have, the guy in the front desk.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So can I have your card, or can I have your email address?
MGANOR.
Thank you, it's really
So your office is in UT?
Yes.
Yeah.
great. Let me know if you need anything, we're in the capital always.
I'm a professor.
The capital is her district, in her district, so.
Thank
that's
you,
our
appreciate
capital
that.
office in your district.
Did you happen to bring a card? We were hoping for a business card. Did you bring a card?
I don't have, sorry, I don't have a
Okay.
business card, but I
that's
can
okay.
give you sort of, first of all, I'm on UT's website.
We didn't catch your name, and that's why I asked her to check for a business card. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sorry. So it's GANOR, so Mira, M-I-R-A.
First name is Mira?
Yes.
Okay.
And then GANOR.
Would you like to do that? Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And how do we reach you if we have to?
Oh, so yeah. So it's mgaynor@law.utexas.edu. And it's all
So what,
website.
Where you can see the weather, but I've been inside.
what school are you with?
The law school.
Until I walked out.
GNR at
Law. Law.utexas.edu.
Law.
Maybe it works without the law, but I've never tried. Probably does, but better to add the law.utexas.edu.
Thank you so much for all the work that you've done.
Oh, absolutely.
I appreciate it.
It was my pleasure to help.
Yeah, I know. I'd like to look through the whole legislation and see. Do you know of any corporations who are working in housing which are a public benefit, like beach-friendly affordable housing? That's my interest in here. Because that, we're looking at creating a corporation to build some, because
So first of all, in Texas, it's new, so it's not effective. So we won't have anybody in Texas, right? What we have is Delaware, right? The only company that I know in Texas is actually Data.com, so I would say no, but I'm sure that in California, if you Google it in California, yeah, because
this is all gonna be new ground, we're gonna be blazing a trail here. And I'm excited just to find out, what's going on, so,
Yeah, but
how to do it, and what make it easy.
yeah, in other places, I think since 2010 we already have that in other places, in California, and also with the B Corp certification, which is similar but not the same. You have some
Do you have
similar.
experiences with co-ops and co-housing models?
No, I personally don't. So co-ops are different because it's not sort of the idea they're in the profits go to the workers, and that's not sort of, here we're talking about a for-profit corporation, profit of the shareholders, investors, so it's really not a co-op. It's an alternative for that, but it's really
Right, because I'm
different.
looking for an alternative, and that's why I think this is a good thing, and that's why I came here today to listen and understand.
It sounds like a
Yeah, because we're
perfect
looking at
alternative.
co-housing. Co-op is a type of co-housing, but there's a legal structure to it. We're looking for a more flexible legal structure that will allow for co-housing if possible, but necessarily be a co-op. So it's an interesting.
Yeah, so hopefully,
Yeah,
hopefully
and
by
actually
aggregating, our
may
first step is, right, which is
arguably work even better because some co-ops, there are some arguments people are saying, oh, because the members have such a minuscule interest that they are not actually don't really have the interest and they are not involved. And here you potentially have investors, so it actually can work better.
And that's why the city of Austin, we're trying to build affordable housing, and the city just passed a resolution that for co-ops, and they're also trying to figure out, to make financing possible for co-ops. But I'm wondering now, how will public benefit corporations and the city government work together to build affordable housing?
So anyway,
Is there something that we should do while the city is developing its new land development code and allow for these models to happen?
Yeah, so the question is, who will
Would be a good
actually,
person to help with
who
this?
will actually be the shareholders in a sense?
It would be the public who are doing, those are all things
Public
that have to think
investors.
through. Yeah, the investors.
And the profit will come for the people who will pay the rent,
But
but the rent will be restricted because of
Because
the
there's a public
benefit.
mission, and that, it's not like they're maximizing that, it's social impact investing, patients investing, if you may, but in a slightly different manner. So,
Thank you so much.
yeah, so if you know somebody who is interested or is willing to work with us on doing and breaking new ground there, I would be happy to
If I
connect.
hear, I'll tell you. But
Are you looking for somebody in the city of Austin?
Somebody that can help the city of Austin, help us draft a resolution for the city of Austin, so that just like.
In her office.
Right, but
They
they don't
care a
have.
lot, they care a lot about affordable housing.
Absolutely they care, but it would be nice to have somebody from UT or whatever from, who's helped write this, be involved with creating that for Austin. It would be very interesting to have that happen.
yeah, I mean, I thought that actually you needed somebody that is a positive to step forward, right? Because she might be interested in affordable housing. I think she already knows, but can you sort of bring that to
Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. I'll just send
Obviously,
you
if
my
you have any
email, if you
questions,
have any thoughts, send it to me.
Yeah, if you ever have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm just thinking about if it's, I'm just trying to, I have to think if it's really the right structure, because at the end of the day, you still need profits.
Yes, you
And-
still have revenue generation, like if you build housing, you still have revenues being generated.
Yeah.
But it could be good if it's a public-private partnership with a public benefit corporation, if that's something that can be done.
Yeah, I mean, the public benefit corporations, the other stakeholders don't have standing. So it's only the shareholders who can sue if the mission is not really, if the public benefit is not really pursued. So I'm not sure it's quite the right form. If
Because
it
the
works,
city
it
is
will be wonderful.
interested in making sure this kind of housing gets built. And there are people, like the Indian American community wants a certain type of housing as we grow older. So they have money, but we want to make sure that that money, it's not just a purely business transaction, but it's a benefit that can be given to older adults. So that we have a portion of it which is affordable, that's kind of where I'm going. So the city may be able to, put in a bid.
So what I would try to do is not just try a very general public benefit, but have a more concrete requirement. Let's say we really want to keep it low and let's say 50% below market or whatever, 30% below market. You can have it there, you can have it in the charter.
Would you help us write that mission, that public benefit, if you may? Is there some way, because not knowing enough about it, I'm not.
My problem is not so much that it's right, it is that once it's written, again, the only person who can actually enforce it are the shareholders. And the shareholders, their profits, so it's good, but it might not be good enough, so that's why I'm a little bit hesitant here.
Well, let's try it, see where it goes. If it doesn't
No, it
work.
is nothing, it's, it will be too late if it doesn't work. It's not how we draft it, it's how we enforce it later. Because again, the only enforcers are the shareholders.
Yes.
And
So in the co-housing concept that there's some housing available for those who cannot afford, but we want to accommodate them. So there's a little bit of yeah, okay, so anyway.
Maybe if we have, I'm not familiar with
Brainstorming
it. If we
necessary.
have something like, the city as a shareholder, it has like one share and then they have, well, actually it has to have 2%
Well, you said a
according to.
public-private partnership, so.
Right, but that's why I don't
Yeah.
understand how, she's saying that they have to be a shareholder. And
But
so-
yeah, and 2% is that to have standing to actually sue
Ah.
derivatively. So as long as we can be sure that somebody who has 2%, has an interest in keeping it as the enforcer, then maybe it works, because otherwise, there's too much user who become greedy, then it won't work here, right? It's not like, in other situations, we always have the customers and the marketing that will help us save the mission. But in a situation like affordable housings, I'm not sure the shareholders are the really people for that, unless we make sure that there is this sort of goal, as if golden shares that belong to a governmental entity that can enforce that.
Because in neighborhood housing and community development part of the city, we would be interested in doing something like that. So, yeah, I'm just gonna send you an email, let's brainstorm a little bit, think about it, and see if you can. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're
Appreciate
welcome.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
To tell you the truth, the last storm, I said, okay, well, it's start now.
Yeah. I haven't seen a proper snowstorm, but I'm sure at some point you just want to go drive your car and, not be snowed in.
Not when you're snow, so
Yeah.
no, I was working sort of walking distance, otherwise it's just, it's bad.
Yeah.
It's really silly. And I went, it was really tough winter. People were telling me that they were walking in foreign. Have this special chamber for your voice, and yeah, we thought so too, but it just didn't work. It's really fun, but as long as it's not much.
Yeah.
So I just haven't been once, that was my option, but I want to do it once.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you're over it.
Totally over it.
Scratch the itch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're hopefully your foot's back.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's the plan. Thank you so much. Excellent. Thank you. Bye.
It's alright. Austin road is pretty bad.
All good.
Yeah.
If we look like, would you guys, everything you all look like, these are like completely untouched.
Yeah.
There's a lot of,
Yeah, I mean, whatever you guys
I don't
want.
wanna like leave you with trash, but
No.
we can take whatever. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, because there's much. Basketball.
Why is that?
Oh, because they had last night up here.
Because no one else took theirs.
I wonder if you can hear the YouTube video, because it's not mic'd. You're supposed to be talking in the microphone.
She asked you how to turn it off.
She asked me. Well, I went back and told them like the microphone's not working.
Test.
There you go. Do you have the remote here? Well, that one's definitely a woman.
That was on back this. Video was definitely. Yeah.
No, this one's.
This one was definitely. Or some check it out. If I do that, that's good. I'll come down and grab or check out. VR over there. And then kind of stuff.
That'll be my signature. I take that.
Oh, she did.
It's like,
Oh, not really.
this one's like, I like that one.
Maybe some tables towards the end. How bad it is, and the design space with it.
Yours is a
Maybe like outdoor girl.
Oh, okay.
That one more. Why do you have to fit, why do you have to be so gender binary?
You, because you started it. I said that probably does.
Do you want another? Let's see.
Just go back and find that. come up with this?
Huh?
Did you guys come up with this?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, most of his questions were, yeah, he was a staffer for a while, and now works for Glass House Policy. I don't think he's moderated any of our,
vegetable?
I believe that's potato.
What's that?
Yep, y'all laid it all up. Oh, good stuff.
And this is the soup or what?
I'm not too sure.
Oh, we need to, stop the live stream too.
There's a live stream in here.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause did you hear what happened yesterday?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So he finds it in the morning.
It's like 10 hours
That's
long.
cut out, yeah. Everything.
So you work here?
Yes, sir.
What company you work for?
I work for a factory.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. They have so many other companies.
Yeah, this guy. Yeah,
Thank you. It's a good session today.
Yeah.
You got a good host, yeah.
Good.
Good. Thank you.
Take away some of the trash. I guess. Is this wine opener? Does it go in Molly's desk? Oh, it's this?
Put those chairs back out. We can put them back out. Those tables are good.
Oh yeah, you have your event tomorrow? Yeah, Molly said she wanted yeah.
That's where that beverage cart might be, huh?
Did he put these there, or should we move these?